Welcome to the It's All Possible Leadership Podcast. This episode, I'm speaking with Michael Oates. Michael is a seasoned professional and an awesome leader. I've had the privilege of working with Michael, both in his roles at Ernst & Young, or EY, when he was a pursuits leader, and then lately at Australia Post, where he was a general manager. It's going to be a great conversation. We really unpack Michael's leadership journey. Michael, how are you?
I'm terrific, Rob, and thanks for having me.
Fantastic, Michael. I'm really excited to have you on. We've known each other for a while, but we've never had the chance to have a great chat like this. So really looking forward to it. Tell me, first up though, what does the word possibility mean to you?
Possibility. Look, to me, I think it means, and it's one of my sayings, I guess I live by, and that is, if it is to be, it's up to me. So if it's possible, it's up to me to make it possible. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, good. So you see opportunity, but you say, you know what, it's going to take action by me to make it. I like to think about that of taking possibility into probability. Because there's two different things. It's possible correct. I could do that. But what's the probability? I'm probably pretty low unless I do something.
That's right. Absolutely.
I love it. And let's talk about your career. Now, I didn't know this, but apparently you started life as a plumber. Tell us about that.
I did. So essentially, like all school leavers, you go up to schoolies and you have your rite of passage up there on the Gold Coast back in the late 80s, and I literally was coming back. I didn't want to go to university at that point in time, and one of our mates said, "Look, my uncle's looking for a plumbing apprentice. Would you be interested?" So I literally got off the plane, and the next day I was on the end of a shovel digging trenches, and now I'm a qualified plumber.
Qualified plumber. Now, back in those days, of course, you weren't looking cool driving around your Toyota Hilux. You were just, it was hard work.
It was hard work. And then believe me, they knew how to work the apprentices. Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Well, I did. I didn't do plumbing, but I worked in my dad's motor mechanic shop for a long time, and I think child labour came from my parents. I think they kind of had the whole thing well mastered. I started about 6 years old. That's it. Family love. I think everyone who's in a small business or a family business understands that. Who were you when you were growing up? Who were your mentors? Who were some of the people you looked up to?
Look, it's interesting. I think I've got some older brothers. One of my older brothers in particular was a mentor. I guess someone I looked up to in terms of just what he achieved and the way he went about things. And I also had a mate's dad who was very successful in industry, in manufacturing, and still is. And he was always sort of available to myself and my mates. Just one of these guys who would always be there giving you advice, sort of life lessons. And look, he was somebody who, again, very approachable and just had the ability to give you really simple messages that gave you cut through. And that's probably something that's carried with me in terms of the way I try and mentor or at least pass on messages, even as a father to my 4 kids. It's just give them simple messages that can really help them in terms of life lessons.
I think the other point you made there was a good one. Was he was also available and relatable. So he was available and relatable, because you can have all the great messages, but if you're not available, if you're not there to see people, then it kind of just stays inside, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And what's really interesting as well is that he's now in his nearly near his 80s, and he's still available, and he still follows myself and my other close mates really closely with genuine interest in terms of their careers and what they're doing in their families. So yeah, it's been terrific. And I've got one other mentor as well who was worked for News Corp and TNT, and a strong logistics background. And when you look at the history in terms of my career, he was also somebody who was able to give me a lot of direction and help shape the approach that I've taken.
That's wonderful. I like and it's also sometimes it can be family, but also it can be someone just a bit removed from family too, can't it? Just someone who's got that maybe a little bit of independence or a little bit of an external view.
Oh, absolutely. My father is obviously always been there for me, and he's a great role model, and certainly played his part. But I guess looking outside the family, I've been fortunate to have some great mentors as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Now you moved from plumbing but you had a great career at DHL. So you're at DHL for a number of years. How did the move to DHL come about from plumbing? You just had enough of the pipes and the digging? And
Well, that's right. In fact, it was interesting. I worked for a construction hire company when I got out of plumbing, went into a construction hire company called Rec Air Hire at the time, which is now Coates Hire. Had a sales role there. moved from Adelaide to Melbourne. And it's funny, I've got my first job down at South Melbourne, and I had to go and do a site inspection. And the guy said, you've got a job, you've got to inspect a site in Flinders Street. And I turned to the guy next to me and said, where the hell is Flinders Street? And they said, wow, you really are new, aren't you? So, but I'd been approached, when I was at Rec Air, received a call to come across to, DHL and explore that opportunity. And I did, and certainly didn't look back. It was a great role.
What did you like about sales? What attracted you to sales, or what did you enjoy once you got into it? Because maybe you weren't attracted, but you landed a role. What did you enjoy about sales?
Look, I love the thrill of the chase, just the deal. Just finding a way to get a deal across the line, and just that whole customer psychology, taking on that transition process from no, I don't need this, to I absolutely want this, and I know I need this at the end, and getting that win-win. So yeah, that's what I loved.
Yeah, fantastic.
And still love.
Yeah, I know it's hard to when you kind of have that in your personality and your DNA, and I think that's very true. You're a good session and had some great experiences at DHL. Can you tell us some of the highlights of DHL for you?
Oh, look, I think a couple of highlights. One would be some of the certainly early on was some of the big deals that I brought along. I mean, I walked into DHL. The person I took over in key accounts took all of the any of the customer information. So I went in and I had one business card on my desk from one of the customers. So essentially, it was a blank canvas start again. And one of my mentors said to me, in sales, you go where the money is and you go there often. But I had to find out where the money was. So I went down on the floor at DHL to the operations guys and said, who's been here the longest? Found out who was there the longest. Went across, spoke to him. I said, what have been the big volumes of freight that have come through here over the years? And they said, well, we used to get annual report moves through here, but we don't get them anymore. So I went back, looked at the ASX, looked at who are the biggest overseas share registries, and one of them was the banks typically and the mining companies, but NAB. And I actually approached the lady who ran the share registry at NAB, and I said, I tried to get through. I rang her. I turned up at NAB headquarters, could not get through, couldn't get any anywhere at all with her. So I was sitting across the road from the 500 Burke Street in a cafe, and I was just sort of working out how the hell do I get this to this lady. And I saw a florist, and this is a true story. I walked across to that florist. I bought a bunch of flowers. I wrote on the card. I said, your name was Nikki. I said, dear Nikki, if you can take the time to smell the roses, can you please take the time to pick up the phone and give me a call? Went across to security, handled it in, went back, bought a coffee, and within 5 minutes, my phone rang. She said, you are the most persistent sales rep I've ever had. And I said, great, when can I see you? She said, well, come across to security and I'll meet you in 10 minutes. So anyway, 3 weeks.
That's fantastic.
I had 2 semi-trailers out the front of DHL at APAC Drive at Tullamarine with about 40 tonne of annual reports that we sort of stole off Australia Post at that time, but there you go. So so that was the first one. The second one was achieving the Global President's Club status, so the top 10 salespeople at DHL, where I was able to get across the Bahamas, and it was an incredible experience. So to come from Australia, being the first person in Asia Pac to achieve that status, and when that competition came out, and I said to my wife, I said, I'm going to the Bahamas, and she said, you've got to be kidding me. She said, this is DHL. We've got they're in every country around the world, and there's only 10 people. And it was like, seriously, like Willy Wonka, right? Getting the golden ticket. But I went down to the travel agent. I got a handful of brochures from on the Bahamas, and I cut them out and I put one inside my cupboard. So every morning I opened up to get dressed, I saw the Bahamas brochure, one inside the shaving cabinet, and one on the sun visor in my car. So it was just a constant reminder of this is what I want to achieve, and this is what I want to get. And I worked pretty hard and achieved it.
So Michael, there's a couple of things there I'll just take you back a bit with. The first one was just the science and art of sales. And I believe, and I know you do too, there's more science than art in sales, or there's a healthy mix, at least.
Yes.
And I think what you did in terms of saying, and I love that quote, by the way, go where the money is and go there often. but you had to find the money. And so that was literally not just sitting down here pumping out phone calls. You went down, you saw the most experienced people who are no doubt in operations in the business. So there's collaboration going there already for you. You're probably one of the few salespeople who's down there with the ops guys. The ops guys have all this intel, which they still do now, are able to give that to you. You fine-tuned it and said, well, if I'm going to go to the Bahamas or I'm going to achieve the numbers, I'll go find where the money is, and then work your way back. I loved you going to the ASX, finding out, well, actually, who are the biggest companies, the most amount of shareholders, so therefore they're going to send out as many annual reports. I mean, what you're really doing is just really using your intellect and process to actually fine tune where was my best hit going to be. So I see, just wanted to bring that out because I think that while you and I we kind of rapped about that, a lot of people don't. I just want to bring that out for people on the podcast. That kind of process is something you can still do today. In fact, today, Michael, it's so much easier, isn't it, with the net to go and do that kind of thing as
Absolutely.
well.
And look, there was one example where, there was, talk about creating something out of nothing, but BHP was another example where they had a very big share registry overseas, and it was a great opportunity. But again, trying to get into that share registry where they were so entrenched with Australia Post at that time. And I said to, got to that point, and this is about asking great questions as a salesperson and knowing what questions to ask. And you asked that, sort of a sweeper question where I said to Jim Jones, who managed the share registry at the time, I said, Jim, if there was one thing you could change about the way that you're currently working with Australia Post, I know it's fantastic, but there's always one thing, what would it be? And he pondered for a while and he said, if I could have tracking on my international shipments, that would be really helpful. And I said, well, we've got tracking. He said, I didn't know that. Now, as it turned out, it was a white lie. We didn't have tracking, but what I knew I could do is leverage the operations network and track it through all the way to, as it turned out, to New York in this instance. And so I went back to the operations and I said to the guys on the floor, I need your help. I need you to give me the contacts all the way through for this freight to New York. As it turned out, what I did was I was getting phone calls in the middle of the night saying, flight CX279's just landed in Singapore, or it's landed in Dubai, wherever it was, the routes it was going. So we're going to New York, UK, and South Africa. And I was actually sending him through emails with updates saying, here's the latest tracking results. Now, it was only because I was on the phone during the night. As it turned out, we had 9/11 happened. So the New York shipment landed in JFK. I'd sent the BHP the email saying, here's a proof of arrival. It arrived at 8 a.m. on 9/11. And obviously everything, 9:30 that morning, New York time, everything sort of, we all know what happened. And Jim Jones contacted me later that day. He said, I can't tell you how grateful we are that we got that proof of delivery. He said, because whilst we can't touch that freight, it's lodged in New York. It's deemed to be, because it's deemed to be lodged, we don't have to move the AGM now. So the board, the chair, everyone has been on the phone with me this morning. So,
wow.
And making sure you do what you say as a salesperson. From that point in time, he continued to give us that annual report without question for the following years.
I think what you also did there was around the tracking was understand from Jim, what does actually tracking mean? And for me, that's what he wanted. He didn't need to have electronic stickers or an email every 5 minutes. What he needed was these things. And so, and while, as you said, you didn't actually have tracking, you kind of did have tracking and you had the capability to do tracking. It was really just a little bit of effort, wasn't it, to do what he needed? And sometimes we miss it between the customer and the sales. We make these assumptions or we misalign, right? And I think that's through great questioning we can align.
And it's understanding, how do you make them look good in the eyes of their own stakeholders?
Yeah, or not look bad in the case of Jim's one this time.
Correct, absolutely.
Now you then went from DHL and you moved to, I think it was, you ended up, I think a couple of different roles, but you ended up at EY at Ernst & Young. And this is where you and I came across each other when you were heading up pursuits there. What was the attraction to professional services for you?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I wasn't looking for, to head to professional service, but I was working at Bosch, Robert Bosch at the time. I was at Bosch to start up the business process management operation for them in Southeast Asia. And at that point in time, I got a call from EY, and they said, look, you've got a really interesting background in terms of your BD experience. We think it'd be valued over here at EY. Would you consider coming across? My brother had worked for PwC and KPMG, so I knew it was a fast-paced, high-energy, full of deadlines environment. But I wanted to be part of that. That's I was really keen to get exposure and experience there. So I went across, took on that role, And look, it was a fascinating role. It was everything that I thought it would be. It was incredibly high pressure. As I say, week after week of deadlines. Every day you were getting out of bed thinking, right, how do I add value to the partners today? Because you as a BD resource in a partnership, you're a cost, and so you need to make sure that every day you're adding value. Otherwise, you'd be thrown to the curb. So it was a terrific experience. I met some great people, learned a hell of a lot. I was given an opportunity to be the orals coach for the partners for Australia and New Zealand, and negotiations coach as well, which again I've been able to take with me in terms of that experience.
Michael, I think that's a really good perspective to share a little more on, and just to deep dive a little bit. So in the professional services world, as you and I know, that yes, BD, markets, pursuits, there's various names for it, but they are seen as a cost to the partners, essentially the owners of the business, and so you, as a salesperson, and often that word's not used in the professional services, but that's essentially what you're doing. You've got to be adding value to those people when you get out of bed every morning, as you said. And I don't think a lot of people realize that that's really in sales, that's what you're doing. You are a cost to the organization in a sales role. So if you're not adding value to your customers and to the business, then it's just you're on a hiding to nowhere, really. But it's just a lot more, I guess, tragic and very quick inside a professional services environment.
Look, absolutely. And as you would know, Rob, through in the EY partnership, there are so many just incredibly clever people, talented people there. But the reason they have BD is because they're technically brilliant, but on the commercial side is probably where there is a gap there. So there's a real role that BD can play, and if you can fill that role, and again make those people look great in front of their clients, like with the orals coaching and the rehearsals and the role playing and everything we would do there. It's incredible how much you can, as a partner, you can become great commercially in terms of your presenting and the way that you get that commercial message across. And believe me, when you are successful and you win some of these deals, then you really start getting some currency in the organisation. So, and it's great when your phone started. You knew you started to get a level of success when your own phone would start ringing with partners saying, "Can you work with me on this deal? Can you help me on this?" And that's when you knew you were sort of getting cut through.
Now, that's a wonderful reward, isn't it, when you get those calls? But I have to say, Michael, that's so true. I had one tax accountant overseas from EY, and he said to me, he said, "You do realise that business development is not the first love of a taxation accountant."
Absolutely, it's right out of their comfort zone, right?
But what he said, he followed it up with, and that's why I like the process of understanding the science behind it, and yes, the role plays. You say that, but we just don't do enough. I don't believe salespeople generally, sales leaders don't do anywhere near enough. Whereas in professional services, it was just the way you did it. It was like you just role played. The orals, the presentation, coaching that's in there is just so vital, and I just see that there is just how it is, whereas I'd love to see that in other organizations become how it is.
Absolutely. And I've always been a massive believer in role playing, in objection handling, looking at the different areas of the sale. Like before I'd start a sales meeting at DHL Express, we would always have, we'd go around the table and I'd give everyone an objection. They'd have to overcome it just as a 5-minute, just to keep you sharp and keep you on your game. And then we jump into the sales meeting. But very under-leveraged.
Now, you made the move to Australia Post. What was the attraction to Australia Post?
Look, I've got to say there wasn't an attraction initially. I mean, I again was fortunate enough to get a phone call to see if I'd explore the opportunity, and it wasn't until a third phone call where I finally said, "Okay, we'll catch up and have a coffee and talk about this." But having had my own along the way, I'd had my own online courier company that I created back in 2003 whilst at DHL Express. That was all consuming for a long time, and was a great experience. But I'd had enough of logistics, and I thought, this is it. I'm moving on. Was enjoying my time at EY in professional services. But when the opportunity was presented to me and it was a real turnaround opportunity at that point in time. And I love turnaround opportunities. So trying to create something out of nothing or off a low base. I came across to Australia Post, worked for Bob Black under the parcels area. He was the chief operating officer at the time. And look, that is probably the one role that I have absolutely loved through my career. It was just so energized, jumped out of bed every day. I was in the office at sort of 6:15, 6:30 most days, and was sort of walking on the floor, turning the lights on, and was the last one off of a night time. But it didn't feel like that because I just loved it. So and we really turned it around. I mean, I said to Bob in the interview, the last interview, I said, let's fast forward 12 months, Bob. I said, I walk into your office and you say to me, Michael, you have had an amazing year. I said, you tell me what that looks like. And he sort of threw him a little bit, but he said, look, we've probably currently got 1.3% growth at the moment. He said, if you can walk in 12 months' time and give me 3% growth, he said, that's a great year. And I walked in 12 months later, and I think we're about 6.5% growth. And he said, don't even say it. So it was that was just sort of the relationship we had. But yeah, we had a great time. He was an incredible guy to work for, really tough, a real driver for success, and results. But I thrived in that environment, and yeah, it was terrific.
And he brought the energy too, didn't he, Bob? And he was energetic. He was passionate, about the business. So just imagine
very
that when you walked in at 6%, 6.5%, I imagine Bob was trying to find a way out of the room at that point.
That's right. I don't think he was looking forward to that meeting, but anyway, it was a nice problem to have.
It's interesting. I've spoken to a number of leaders at Australia Post, and I asked them about what attracted them to Australia Post. Almost every one of them says, well, not a lot at the time, but when I got into it and started to understand it, and I just loved going to work. Like what you said, so many leaders have said that. But their first issue was like, oh, hang on a second. But when they got into it, they were like, this is fantastic. What a great opportunity. What a great business. So it's really interesting to see and how excited they were and passionate they are about the business, and even more so that once they've been in it a couple of years, which is interesting.
Yeah, and look, I don't mean to sound corny here, but you do get that sense of community, because you really do understand and feel the role that Australia Post does play and has played for so long, right across Australia. It really does play an important role, and you feel like you do contribute in a small way to helping play that part.
And we had COVID clearly through 2020. How did your leadership style change when you had to go remote leading and remote working?
Yeah, look, it was. I think I certainly had to amp up the empathy side in terms of leadership, because there were people coping differently. Some were coping quite well, and the introverts quite enjoyed being at home and being on the on the Zoom meeting and turning their camera off and still talking and feeling quite comfortable. But others really did struggle, and so the constant check-ins with people, and just really playing more of a friend role as opposed to a manager role, making sure they were okay was critical. In terms of me and my actual working style, look, I find I can work anywhere, right? So in the office or at home, it certainly didn't have too much of an impact on me. What I did find really challenging, and still find challenging when you've got to work remotely or over the screen, is not having the ability to read the room properly, not being able to test the temperature. That the body language cues, being able to just read the play and get a better outcome, particularly when it's an emotive topic. And there's a bit of heat there. I'd much prefer to be face to face than be over a Zoom call.
I think that's right. I think that has some implications for the hybrid model going forward too, Michael. I mean, I give an example. This week, I had a meeting with a C-suite CEO and a couple of the direct reports, and while I went in the office, and they said, "Oh, it's great, thanks for coming in. You didn't have to." And I said, "Well, I just kind of felt it'd be good." And so I was in there, and we sort of, we made the CEO's office into a nice little office. And someone else, we had two other people who were actually downstairs, and they were going to do it over over Teams. The CEO called them and said, "Hey, you're downstairs. You should come up." And so anyway, they came up. But it was, yes, the body language was one thing, Michael, but the other things that I'd kind of missed a little bit was the absolute gold in the questions and the little bit of banter we had after the meeting was stopped, right? As we walked out of the room.
Yeah.
And a couple of them said, "You know what, I'm really interested in this. And what do you think about this, this? And then the CEO walked with me up to the lift. And the gold in the minute and a half in the walk to the lift.
Yep.
And it just dawned on me as I was walking to my car afterwards, I thought, gee, we just don't get that through the Zoom, the Teams, or the WebEx, do we? We don't get that little extra bit at the end where they're really expressing how they feel, as opposed to being on show in the room.
That's a really important point. And just to build on that, the other point is when you're working in an open plan office, and you might be focused in the zone working on something at your desk, but you subliminally still pick up on all the conversations around the office. So you're still hearing things. And so that, 2 days later, somebody might come to you with a question, and then you go, "Well, hang on, I just heard Bob over there talking about that back on Tuesday. So go and speak to him." You miss all of that. So that's where, to your point, that's just the additional value that, I guess working remotely, we don't have anymore.
I wanted to ask you a couple of things. You've led product development teams, and you've also, we talked about at EY, you worked across a number of silos and added value to business, which was very silo orientated as they are. But you've also led product development and had to, align marketing and sales and product development. What's your secret to bringing disparate teams together?
Look, I think great communication for a start, right? So you have to be an effective communicator. You have to be a great listener. I think when you certainly with product and sales, bringing them together is, as my current role is heading up mail services at Australia Post, being in constant contact with sales. And again, I use this term, but testing the temperature in terms of the market and understanding what they need and staying relevant to them is just so critical. So we will work with the sales teams and get the key customers in to have regular focus groups on particular products, on how they're working, what's working well, what isn't working so well. If we could change one thing again, what would it be? And then also sharing with them, what we're exploring in terms of what the future looks like, and then how would that impact their business, and how can they also influence a better outcome in terms of what we're trying to design. So taking that co-creation approach with customers. So working with sales in that respect is critical, and then we all go on that journey together, as opposed to product saying, right, here's the solution. This is what we think the customers need, as opposed to customers actually saying, well, actually no, that's you don't know us.
Yeah, I think that's good. Bringing that group of people together. It's one of the things we used to do. Apple were quite passionate about it. In fact, I was doing some reading. I didn't really know how they got the process working, but a guy called Bill Campbell, who was a great coach to Google and other organizations, you may have come across him, and he ran Claris, their software company. And one of the things that Bill would do, if you ever heard the sales team down with the product team doing something like this, hey, we've been out seeing a customer, what the customer wants is a product that does this, and this, and that. Could you guys build that, right? Bill would somehow hear about it. Yep. And he would grab hold of the salesperson, usually by the scruff of the neck. And he would say, I love your passion for talking to customers. I love the fact you're out there with customers. I love the fact you're bringing back feedback. I love it. Here's what I never, ever want you to do again. Do not go to the product team and tell them what they need to design. Go to the product team and give them the customer problem. Tell them the problem the customer is experiencing. Mm-hmm. Then I want you to introduce them to the customer, because they need to talk to customers more than they are. And then I want you to stay back, because the product development guys, that's how they think. If they understand a problem, they'll come up with a far better solution than you will come up with. Yeah, let them do their thing, but don't stop coming to them. It was just a really great way of triangulating, the customer, product development, and sales, but not having sales come in and go, add the Ethernet port to that, or I want that mouse to come out of that, that kind of lead, or let's put a motherboard like that. It was, here's the problem. Because the problem could be, Bill Campbell's point was, the problem could be actually bigger than you think, and actually be affecting way more customers than just your product set. Yeah.
It's a far more logical approach. I think it's a brilliant approach.
Now you've also done a lot of leadership, and you've been, you definitely have a growth mindset. I know that. And you did the Authentic Leader program at Harvard. What did you take away from that one?
Look, that was, again, another incredible opportunity to go there and study over in Boston. Look, it was so authentic leadership development. It was about essentially discovering your true north. So you had to map out your life journey, and you had to really note and be explicit with what were the key events along your life journey up to this point now that have shaped and influenced who you are and what you've become. So it's a pretty raw experience, and you break out and you'd be living with in groups of 8 on campus there, and you'd all have to share this your life journey and talk it through, and as you can imagine, you have to be vulnerable, you have to open up and let people in, and that was a really raw experience. But what that did immediately was build trust amongst the team, and that was probably one of the biggest things that I got out of that. And so what I've been doing now each year at Australia Post is, with our top talent program, we take them through that true north experience, and just again get them to show that their own vulnerability, and get them to really help them to understand who they are now is shaped by these life events along the way, So that has been terrific. I mean, the other key thing is, I said to our CEO Christine at the time, I said, I think to get to an executive level role, IQ is a given, but the difference for me, what I believe between a good leader and a great leader is the EQ piece. Having that emotional intelligence. And so Daniel Goleman, who's we know as one of the grandfathers, I guess, of emotional intelligence, and I think having read and studied a lot of his work, I really do believe that the EI piece is a difference between a good leader and a great leader.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. I'm a big fan of EI. It's just that it really is that extra bit, isn't it? And I do find it's a difference between that really competent person and then someone who's got really strong credibility, right? So the credibility comes because they care, because they're emotionally intelligent, around the room. And it's even where I've been doing some work with the sales leaders. And it's one of the things we talk about with Pat Lencioni's work around teamwork. And if you've seen that, what makes a great team player, which is humble, hungry, and smart. And the smart is emotionally intelligent, right? And that's the definition of that. So they're hungry in terms of they want to get it, they're passionate, they're humble in terms of they realize it's the team and not about them, and that they're emotionally intelligent to be able to see the play and to make the connections. So that's
right.
Point.
And you can't, when we talk about authentic leadership, you can't fake it. You either are authentic or you're not, because I think you do your own teams a disservice if you fake that stuff, because they see straight through it. So I think you just got to bring your real self to the table. And in fact, one of the partners at EY once said to me, not long after I started, is that we hired you for you. So just be yourself. Don't try and be somebody you're not.
Yes.
And I really, from that day forward, have taken that advice on, that it's just not worth trying to be somebody else, because there's no one else like you. So just be you and own it.
Yeah, as I said, be you and not the second best version of somebody else. It's
there you go.
No point. Now, look, you've got there's about sort of three practices. You and I were chatting a little bit off, but before we got recording, I just want you to talk about those if you can. You had three sort of principles you talked about. So it's the one around if it's to be, and you talked around about money, which is really interesting on a corporate environment, which I love, and about asking questions. So do you take us through those three?
Yeah, sure. So there's a few things that again I take with me all the time, and people who have worked with me in my teams would be well aware of some of these little life rules, I guess. So yeah, as I mentioned before, if it is to be, it's up to me. So I try and get my team members to take ownership and take that mantra on. My family motto is, if you don't ask, you don't get. And so all my kids would subscribe to that, and I can't tell you the amount of times along the way where I've asked for something and I think I bet they say no, but I'm going to ask anyway, and I've been knocked over because they say yes. You've just got to ask, because the worst thing somebody could say is no, and it's a great mantra to take with you, particularly if you've got a sales bent and you just want to ask for that deal. You've got to ask. But the key one, particularly at Australia Post, I say often, and that is we're an $7.5 billion enterprise. So you can imagine there's anything we do is it's always, any decisions are, there's multiple millions of dollars involved in most decisions. That I say to my team, if this was your own money coming out of your own pocket, what decision would you make? Because we do need to take, it's very easy to become desensitized to the number. But you've got to remain focused and say, well, let's take some ownership. And again, you can be very responsible and frugal and look at problems in a very different way if it was your own money. And so, I take that approach every day in the way that I work with my own budgets that I'm entrusted with. And I think we've made some pretty good decisions taking that approach.
It's a very good approach, Michael. It's one that I've always used as well, and it has been. I guess it's just a small business background too, an entrepreneurial background. You're watching every dollar, and so when you see it, get spent because we have to spend it because this end of financial year, or we have to get rid of the money somehow. You go, hang on a second. Well, it just almost flies in the face of your values.
Yes.
And I said, well, hang on a second. That makes no sense. Why are we doing this? Oh, we've always done it that way. And I'm a big believer in one of the principles of the Kouzes and Posner, which is challenge the process. If the process is not productive, then change the process.
Yeah, just because it's always been done that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, things change. Now, if you and I were to jump in the TARDIS and go back in time, if we went to go and have a chat with 15-year-old Michael, just before he took on being a plumber and whipped up to the Gold Coast for schoolies, what would be some advice for 15-year-old Michael that you'd give now?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's probably a few things that I would say, I shouldn't have done, but I have done. But fundamentally, I think the advice would be, see how many times you can say yes before you say no. If I look back over the journey and the times that I've said, I've just gone to that default no as opposed to saying yes. They really could have been sliding door moments. I was selling, I was living in the UK and selling to a particular customer at this time. As it turned out, this customer was he was the creator and the CEO of the Edinburgh Comedy Festival. And I was in London and selling to his doing a pitch to his team. In the end, I stayed back and for a couple of hours, and we had drinks together. And he said to me, "Michael, why don't you stop what you're doing and just pack up and come up to Edinburgh with us and work for me?" And at the time, my go-to was no. And I look back and I go, God, why didn't I just say yes to that? Who knows where that could have gone? And just little life experiences, like my brother, when I was again in the UK, I was working for PwC, and he said, we've got a partners conference up at in Reykjavik in Iceland for 3 days. We're just going to get on skidoos, go cross country, do all sorts. And I said, no, look, I'm in the middle of a sales campaign. I'm leading the campaign. I need to stay here and focus on that. I look back again and go, when the hell am I ever going to get back to Reykjavik? Why didn't I just take that opportunity? But I do say to my kids, let's see how many times you can say yes before you have to say no. But just seize the moment.
It's a great movie, Yes Man. If you haven't seen it, with Jim Carrey, Michael Oates, recommend it for you and the family. It's a classic about living on the other side. What I call living on the other side of yes, which is a really interesting one. For your kids, I did an interview with a guy called Steinis Camp, who's a young cyclist who's now in Denmark cycling and racing over there. And then he lives on the other side of yes. Someone says, we should do a ride. Yeah, I'll do it. And he thinks about it later on, but he's very process oriented. He's very professional, but he's had a chance to ride and race in Denmark where it's freezing and he's getting blown off the roads. But he said yes. And he's 19 years old or something. And why wouldn't you? I mean, why wouldn't you take the opportunity?
And it takes courage, but you've got to do it.
Yeah. Hey, mate, thanks so much for your time, Michael. Really great. I know it's a busy time at Australia Post, and I certainly appreciate it. I know the people listening will certainly appreciate your time. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of the It's All Possible podcast. Please subscribe and rate the podcast you listen to so we can continue to serve you and inspire others. Remember, connect to us on all the social media channels. The It's All Possible podcast is hosted by me, Rob Hartnett, and produced by the phenomena that is Finn Hartnett. Connect with us via LinkedIn, Instagram, or the link tree in the show notes.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.